In this guide, we're going to be checking out all the new enemy types and bosses that were introduced in Atomic Heart's Blood on Crystal DLC. So we're finally wrapping up the story of the first game with one of the beefiest DLCs of the bunch. P3 and his gang of merry misfits have got to storm a giant high-tech facility called the Crystal Complex, which, surprise surprise, is chock full of robotic nasties and weird scientific wonders. Some of which we'll be very familiar with, having popped up all over the main game and in the other DLCs, with others being completely new entries that are here to keep things feeling fresh. One of the robots you'll have definitely seen before in the base game, and one that's probably slapped you in the face a few times, is this funny looking thing called the Burlak. But unlike in the base game where these guys can just be found with their arms stretched out spinning around malfunctioning, and basically just acting as indestructible obstacles, they've now been transformed into a fully fledged enemy type that's actually worth talking about. They're still going to twirl around and knock you down to the floor with those extended limbs, this time locking onto your position rather than just mindlessly dancing around in circles. Though because Burlaks were originally designed to pick up and transport containers using a pair of hand clamps, they'll also be able to grab onto nearby cargo crates and lob them through the air to hit you over distance too, giving them a few different ways to take you on, with them no longer being classified as just fancy looking hazards. But something you won't have seen before is a completely new robot called the Grabber. Probably no surprise how it's managed to get that name. Now these things are built with a few interesting features, not only being limited to those retractable bug legs that pop out of its sides, but also having access to a bunch of wheels under its body, allowing the robot to drive itself around the arena, thus giving it more mobility options and ways in which it can move around the place. You might expect a big claw enemy called the Grabber to be something that's just going to keep picking you up and throwing you around the room, but thankfully it's not going to do that, which to be honest would probably make it a really friggin' annoying enemy to fight. Most of its attacks are still going to come from that claw though, whether it be spinning around, throwing wooden crates, or even being used to vault itself in the air and dive bomb on top of your head, constantly switching between these different attacks and moving around quickly to keep you on your toes. Nice little tip for you by the way, if you notice that the Grabber's side ports have opened up after it's taken a bit of a beating, then you'll often be able to rip out its power unit to finish it off nice and fast. Grabbers can be found pretty much right the way through the DLC, but along with the normal ones, you'll also run into these high voltage variants too. You can tell these guys apart due to them having black paint jobs, and because they're obviously going to be harassing you with those electrified projectiles. Well, all of that extra energy needs to come from somewhere, and in this case, it comes from a few wires underneath the robot, basically tying the thing down in a stationary position. They might look the same at first, but the two Grabber variants almost act like completely different enemy types altogether, with one of them using very aggressive rush tactics, while the other just sits around launching electricity balls over range. Just because the Grabber might be a big machine designed to grab stuff, that doesn't mean our next enemy type called the Raccoon is going to have any kind of resemblance to an actual raccoon. If anything, it's probably got more in common with some sort of scorpion creature, being a really skittish thing that likes to lunge at you with its drill-like tail. The Raccoon-SP is easily one of the DLC's deadliest robots, mainly because they sort of act like mini boss encounters for the most part, having quite a lot of different attacks to chain together like tail jabs, limb thrashes and jumping strikes. Constantly dashing around the arena, charging forwards with those bladed appendages waving around, generally using hit and run tactics to try and get the better of you. They might be frantic buggers, but they do have some blatantly obvious weak spots to compensate, having a few eye-like energy spheres dotted around the sides of their bodies, which can be busted up with some of that firepower to whittle down the Raccoon's health. Not always the easiest thing to do of course, with the bloody thing pretty much always being on the move, though at least it gives you something to aim for. But one of these sneaky bastards actually manages to connect itself to a giant mechanical arm in a warehouse, turning it into a completely different thing altogether. Basically a big hand robot that dangles down from the ceiling. It seems to like playing rock paper scissors, for some reason. Well, the Raccoon-SP has nicely been upgraded from a mini-boss to something that's going to quite literally pack much more of a punch, using a lot of new attacks against you and going about the fight in a very different passive-aggressive sort of way. So basically it's not going to be charging around the room like a coked up crab anymore. This giant claw boss generally prefers to keep some distance and cycle through a number of different yet fairly predictable moves one after the other. As one moment it'll be smashing itself into the floor to generate shockwaves, the next it's going to be throwing a load of explosive mines in your direction, which you might want to shoot to stop them from becoming a problem. Quite a lot of the Raccoon's attacks are now going to be shot out over distance, with lasers and missile barrages being pretty common things it likes to use over range, along with all those physical beatdowns and punches of course. though all of that high energy consumption is going to keep causing the boss to glitch out and drop to the floor. Basically the robot equivalent of getting tired and needing a little bit of a lie down, giving you some nice opportunities to light the thing up with bullets and blast away at those weak spots while it's not whizzing around all over the room. And you'll eventually take care of the big hand boss once that last energy sphere has been destroyed. So the Crystal Complex is the home of some pretty wacky shit, which isn't much of a stretch considering what we've seen in the rest of the game, but the experiments here are a bit more tied into the themes of biological evolution, challenging philosophical ideas like morality and existence, by creating a somewhat immortal life form using polymer-based materials. All of this basically boils down to transferring the minds of human beings and other living creatures into the bodies of weird-looking jelly people, which then go on to live out their new lives in a fake world governed by problematic AI systems. Probably a bit of a sarcastic nod to the way our own reality is heading. It all kind of feels like we've wandered into a Black Mirror episode, and these experiments, known as the Polymorphs, are void of feeling any true emotion, no longer having their humanity, or any kind of purpose to exist at all. Although a lot of them seem friendly enough, just sitting around staring into space like random stoners at a music festival, some of them will choose to become hostile towards you, and those polymer-based bodies are able to soak up a hell of a lot of gunfire, giving them one distinct advantage over their past human anatomy. Another distinct advantage is the fact that they can just casually transform into friggin' Marvel characters now, as some of them like to burst into flame, float around the room and spam fireballs at your face, while some of the others choose to do the complete opposite, becoming frost variants which blast out frozen particles and generate walls of ice. Both of these elemental types are as much of a pain in the arse to deal with as the other, able to take lots of flack and dish it out themselves, even able to switch up their powers and transition between the two elements mid-fight. But the best way to counter these polymorphs is by using the complete opposite elements against them, which can be equipped on your polymer glove by using the chance modules dotted around the facility. Well, one of the most recognisable things in Atomic Heart is of course the robotic twins. I wonder why that is. And so it makes pretty good sense for them to make another appearance here in the final DLC. Because the consciousness of P3's wife Katia has been transferred into one of these twins, she's going to help guide P3 like she did in the past DLCs. But it turns out that the second twin can actually be found here in the complex too, becoming hostile not long after you discover it, thus kicking off another big boss fight, with the twin now being controlled by Char-les. Because we've already fought the twins before in the base game, you should probably know what to expect here. Let's just say there isn't really too much of a difference to the way Left moved and attacked before, lashing out with those nails, spinning around like a ballerina, zapping you over distance with those deadly lasers, and of course, doing that creepy thing where she crawls around the place like a demented spider, along with a whole bunch of other tricks and rapid maneuvers too, all of which get amplified over the fight as the twins' health gets depleted more and more. There's a lot of stuff to watch out for here, but it shouldn't be too tricky to complete with us already pretty much knowing most of the moveset. So, final boss time. At the very end of the DLC, we'll finally get to meet Char-les standing in front of a massive puddle of polymer gunk, and you can probably predict what's going to happen next. He's going to take a little plunge into the stuff, allowing it to combine with his body, only for him to re-emerge moments later as a fat red jello man, now having a lot more power and a whole bunch of wacky polymer-based abilities. Some of Atomic Heart's boss fights have been known for being a bit on the hectic side of things, basically where they'll throw a crazy pile of stuff at you from all kinds of angles and litter the screen in dangerous projectiles. And with this being the final showdown, you can expect this to be one of those kind of fights. Char-les can create a whole buttload of environmental hazards to amplify the chaos and assist him with wearing down your health. He's going to keep summoning these weird floaty polymer jellyfish things, which keep circling around the arena and firing red blobs in your direction. And he's also going to cause a load of red tentacles to come bursting out of the ground too, which slam down on top of your head if you get a little bit too close. All of these things can be destroyed just about as quickly as they pop up, though I guess they do serve as good distractions while Char-les stomps around the place generating shockwaves, lobbing even more projectiles in your face, giving us fancy laser shows which are a bit of a pain to avoid without getting zapped, and burning the living shit out of the floor by creating fire plumes which are even trickier to avoid, unless you're using that grappling hook ability to whisk yourself out of harm's way. Once the big guy's down, he's going to fuse with that evil left twin and basically combine their powers in a unified form, giving the twin a pair of huge polymeric angel wings, thus allowing her to swoop around the room and hit you with a bunch of aerial strikes from above, switching things up and giving you a few new attacks to try and dodge. With that said, a lot of the stuff here is pretty much the same, aside from you now having to aim at a much faster target that's whizzing around in the air. Anyway, once all the boss's health is gone, the twin's going to be apprehended and the remnants of Char-les is going to get shoved into this little cube device, concluding the first game's adventure and opening up a nice little window to the next one in Atomic Heart 2. That's pretty much it for this one, folks, but if you did enjoy this video, then you'll be able to binge watch a whole bunch of others like this on my channel, including guides on Atomic Heart's base game enemies along with the other DLCs. Shout out to all my channel members for supporting the content, and I'll see you in the next one.